Well, g'day, welcome to SteerShed. In a recent video we had a look at one of the largest router bits that toolstoday.com sell from Amana Tool, which was the surfacing bit. And today we're going to look at probably what is the smallest bit that they sell. Now, when you're doing pattern copying, and that's what I've got set up here today, you normally would use a pattern copying bit, either something like this one here, which has the bearing on the top and the cutter below, and what happens is the bearing follows the pattern and the router bit obviously does the routing. In some cases, and that's quite often is used in a table mounted situation. Now if you're hand holding, and there's a number of reasons why you'd need to hand hold the router for the particular job that you're doing, and today's no exception, you might use something like this bit here, which is called an inverted router bit. This is where the cutter is above and the bearing is below, or the bearing is nearest to the router, if you want to think of it in that term. And so this allows you to actually plunge into the workpiece, and then the bearing engages with the template which is sitting on the surface. Now, in this case, again, if you have a look at that bit there is no way that is going to get any of the detail of a small pattern. Now, take this flower for instance. If I was to follow this pattern around with this router bit, you can see the bearing would follow quite neatly, and would basically get none of this detail whatsoever, because the router bit just can't get in there. It's obviously way too large a diameter. So that's a problem. There are smaller pattern copying bits, and this one again is an inverted router bit. This one particularly is another one from Amana Tool, which has got the replaceable head. That's a very cool concept. It means that when the router bit gets damaged, or when it finally can't be sharpened any further, instead of having to replace the whole bit, you just take the head off and put another one on. Another benefit of that is if you're partway through a job, say in a CNC machine, and you don't want to lose that setup, you can actually leave the bit engaged with the router in the CNC machine and just replace the head in situ. Again, a very cool concept. But even so, this one here, although it's finer, it's a smaller diameter, still can't get into those fine details. So again, that one's out of the question. Let me come down to this one here. Now, I honestly don't know if I've seen a router bit, particularly one with a bearing, that is smaller than this bit here. Now, I've seen some with just a rub surface, but again, basically the same sort of diameter. The problem with that is that if it's a spinning surface or a spinning contact area, and of course this is spinning up around about 15 to 20,000 RPM, it can actually end up burning the work. Now that doesn't really matter with an MDF template, but if you're plunging deeper and you're starting to actually engage with the workpiece itself, then burning the workpiece is a big deal. This is where a bearing comes into its own, because in contact with the workpiece, the router bit may be spinning, but the bearing isn't. And the bearing's only moving around the speed that you're moving the router. So the contact surface is not going to end up burning. Now this one here, as you can see with a router bit this small, you can get right into the details and copy the entire pattern. Now, what I've set up here, I'm making a bit of a sign. This is basically what I want is to make a bas relief sign. So one solid piece of material, in this case I'm using MDF, but this obviously can be done into timber as well. And what I want to do, instead of actually sticking letters onto the surface, I want the letters and the background, if you like, to all be one single piece. And particularly if you're working with timber, you'll be able to then see the grains of the timber going along the background, and then repeating across or having continuity across the letters as well. So this is what I've set up here. I've got a bit of an MDF template. I just bought that from a local shop. They sell these sorts of things. It's stuck on using some double-sided tape. Now I use this tape here. It's like a carpet tape, very tacky, very strong and excellent for this sort of application. It'll peel off afterwards too without any issue, without leaving any residue. So that's the actual sign, and what I've actually just done is I've stuck a piece of tape on, and I've just trimmed out the tape from between the letters very quickly with a knife, just to stop it getting mucky around the router bit. Now, because I don't want to try and balance the router on top of just the letters, I've just cut a few MDF strips that are the same height as the letter, just on the table saw, and I've stuck those on, and that will give me a good surface to run the router over the entire area. And the other thing I want is I want to leave a border, so I've actually stuck the MDF around the outside. It haven't had to worry about corners or anything like that. The router bit will just track around there and create the outside pattern as well. And then once I'm near finished, I'll take all this stuff off, leaving that outside border, and complete the job. So that's what we've set up today. Now you can see there's quite a bit of detail in those letters. Again, a heavier router bit just can't get right into those corners to really capture those details. So we're going to use the finest router bit to get right in there. So I'll just secure this to the table and we can get underway. Now for the first pass, what I've done is actually set up that larger router bit. This is the one with the replaceable cutter, as it happens. Just so I can get rid of the bulk of the material around the letters, and then I'll just leave the fine router bit just to do the minimum amount of work around the letters themselves, where it has to get into the detail. Now I've just set my depth of stop there for the first cut, just so it goes deep enough to engage the bearing with the top of the template and not much more, and that way I can just start breaking through the surface, and then I'll just start going a bit deeper until I get down to the depth that I want to get to. So that's certainly the first part, and although we've cleaned out quite a bit, it's certainly of the bulk of the material, you can see I just haven't been able to get into these fine details at all, and they're left rather bare, unfortunately. So what we need to do is change over to the fine router bit and get right into all these details and really finish off the job nicely. And just before I finish then, I'll remove these two inner rails here and just clean up underneath them as well. But I'll leave them in place at the moment because they will help support the router while I'm working on these details. So that's pretty much the job done. Just starting to remove the templates. There's a little bit of error where I've not got the router to exactly the right height. But but that's just something I can deal with a bit of sandpaper. But other than that, it's a pretty good proof of concept. So here you can see the final result, and there's a little bit more cleaning up that I need to do, as much as anything, because of my router techniques not that great. I have done very little work with a handheld router. I have tended to use a table-mounted router for many years, but with the Festool particularly, it's a beautiful little router to actually hand hold. So I'll use that to actually encourage, to inspire me to do a bit more of this sort of work. As you can see very much that you don't need a CNC machine to be able to do this sort of job. With the right router bit and a bit of a template, something that some people would only think is possible with a CNC machine is still perfectly possible with more fundamental techniques. And as I say, with a little bit more cleaning up, this will be quite a nice little sign. It's got a nice little border around it, and if you wanted to take it one step further, even if you don't make them yourself, which is perfectly feasible, there's a whole range of various templates and letters and things like that available from the local hardware store that you can just stick down and then route around and create your own sort of patterns and things like that without without too much effort whatsoever. And as I say, with the finest of router bits, you can get right into those sorts of details.